Well, welcome to this evening's workshop, Resilient Alternatives to Removing Lawn. It is a workshop that's going to be focusing on some things maybe that you haven't thought about. We are hoping that this provides some tools for your landscaping tool belt that will help you out. And I very much want to thank California American Water for hosting us this evening. Do you all want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah. Wendy, would you like to go first?
No, you can go first, Victoria.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria. I am the Northern District Water Conservation Specialist. I'm super excited about this class. I think we're going to learn a lot about removing turf and ways to not only reduce water usage, but increase biodiversity. So excited to learn some new stuff. Thanks for hosting.
And I'm Wendy. I'm from the Southern Region, Water Conservation Specialist. And I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this class. We love to present these classes to you, and we thank G3 for all of their expertise in providing these classes. So let's go.
Without further ado, let us proceed to the topic. All right. One of the things that we provide with these webinars is within 24 hours after the webinar is completed, you're going to get an email from us. It's actually going to be coming from Zoom, and it will be coming to the email address that you used to register for the workshop. And in that email is going to be a bunch of resources and links, and also a link to a PDF of this book. Now, this book has a lot of information, even some stuff that we're not going to be covering tonight, but has a lot of information about the turf removal process and also inspiration for landscapes that will help you to design and build your landscapes. So make sure that you get this in your email in the next 24 hours, and if you don't, you can send us an email and we'll make sure that you get it. Okay, so here's how it's going to go. First, we'll talk a little bit about lawn and just kind of get oriented. Why we like it so much, and because it does have some benefits. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the pitfalls that result sometimes from removing the grass, and how we might be able to avoid that. Then we're going to talk about the watershed approach and how lawns fit into that. For any of you who've taken other classes with us, you know that everything we talk about in landscaping comes back to this concept of the watershed approach to landscaping. Third, we're going to talk about forbs. And if you don't know what a forb is, well, you're going to learn. So forbs are our friends when it comes to lawn. And then we're going to talk about alternative lawns. So other ways that we could have green open space to utilize. And if we wanted to go in the direction of having alternative lawn, we're going to talk about how we select seed in order to do that. It's very cost effective using seed, and we're going to talk about some strategies for that. And then we'll go through the process of how you actually adapt your lawn in order to use seed to change it into something else. So that's what tonight's about. Let's start with the big deal of lawn. Now, this class really is about getting your head around a different type of lawn, a different way of thinking about this big green open space. And things that we're going to be thinking about are, the amount of water that a traditional lawn uses. And then, what are some of the things that we're seeing in a new kind of lawn? If you like green, what can you do to make sure that your landscape kind of mimics that? And how do we make sure that we're saving water with whatever alternatives we do select? The thing about Southern California living, but really this should be all of California living, is this promise of great weather and lawn. And, many people have come to California from other parts of the country. They bring with them an aesthetic that includes lawn. And even though lawn is becoming more and more discussed and thought about as maybe not the best alternative in all cases for ground cover, it is still really the dominant um, ground cover. And so we come here with this idea, we see it, everywhere we look. And the challenge is really that California lawns need quite a lot of water, especially in Southern California and a little bit inland. But really, it's a lot of water no matter what. Even if you're in a part of California that's getting more rain than what you see here. Here we have about 15 inches of rain as an average. So even if you're in a place that is above that average, it still requires maybe 15 or 20 inches more of water in order to keep that lawn looking really beautiful, really green. And uh, what we want to be thinking about with all of our landscape conversions is how do we go from a plant material or a treatment of our landscape that requires, this 50 inches a year of water, and how do we shift into plant material that doesn't require as much water? So when you read about plant material in on websites and in the research that you do, and even when you read articles about lawn transformation, and they say, oh, we want you to be planting low water plants and very low water plants and even moderate water plants. What the heck does it mean? It means that these are plants that only require half or less of the water that a typical monoculture lawn would require. So that's why water agencies are trying to shift us off of lawn into other plant material, is because other plant material doesn't demand as much water as lawn does in California. The other issue is that we have to apply that water very frequently. Often on lawn, it's being applied with spray irrigation. And the spray irrigation is putting out water from each head, as quickly as like 3 or 4 gallons a minute in some cases. And so when you have, or 1 to 2 gallons a minute, even when they're, dialed in, and when you have 10 of these sprinklers all going at one time to water your lawn, you're dumping like 20 gallons of water a minute on the lawn. So, even if you keep your lawn there, we're going to recommend that you upgrade your irrigation system so that you make it more efficient. But the point is that the paradigm that we have now of traditional lawn with the spray sprinklers, it's too much water overall, and it's too much water happening in each event. On top of it, most of our lawns that look like this anyway really don't provide any other ecosystem services. They don't have any biodiversity benefits. They require hours of maintenance if they're mowed every week. That contributes to air pollution. They really don't have any habitat value for pollinators or wildlife. I mean, occasionally you get them in there, but usually they're going after forbs, not even after the grass. They require herbicides and pesticides or chemicals if you want it to look like this. I hope even if you keep your lawn, you don't want it to look like this, but nonetheless, that would require fertilizer. It would require all these fossil fuels essentially to keep it green like this. And it doesn't have any benefit in terms of like stormwater or flood control, really, because the way we manage it, we end up having very short roots. And so it doesn't really absorb all that much water when it rains. So, look, I'm dissing this thing, and it's, there's a reason it really does not provide. So I think what we need to agree is that monoculture lawns, so lawns that have just 1 or 2 species of grass in them, really don't make sense anymore. They're just like having, an ocean in your front yard. Now, you might be tempted to minimize your lawn area, just cut it down to whatever the smallest thing is possible, and maybe even use gravel or ground cover or something like that, or some kind of decomposed granite or something around it. But I want you just to be thinking about when you do remove your lawn, you are actually in a position that you could be heating up your environment. The lawn, believe it or not, is actually providing a lot of benefit when the ambient temperature, is in the 100 degrees. The lawn is 20 degrees or more cooler than that. And all of these other alternatives like rock mulch or synthetic turf or asphalt can be as much as 60 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature. So this is really something for us to be just aware of, that be prepared when we take out the grass. So if we're taking out the grass, we're going to replace it with something that's growing, that's green, that is, cooling the environment instead of heating it up. And we also need to be very cautious because truly the press and a lot of information that we are getting about lawn conversions is leading us down a path that is not good. And, this is a great example. There's a picture that came from the New York Times, and, it's talking about a turf transformation where the people took out their grass and put in decomposed granite with some plants in it. And they love it because it's a clean aesthetic. Yeah, harken back to that picture where we showed the temperature change. This is going to be 20, 30 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature on this particular site. So why are we doing that to ourselves? Don't do it. Don't do it for clean. Because even though a landscape like this might technically save water, it actually kills the soil sponge, and it actually degrades the site and degrades the whole neighborhood, really. I mean, not even talking about the aesthetics of it, frankly. And when we put down gravel mulch and just have a lot of gravel mulch everywhere, this also kills the soil sponge, which means that we're not cooling the planet, we're heating it up. And when we put down synthetic turf, of course, this is the worst of them all, really. As I said, it could be as much as 60 degrees hotter than the ambient temperature. And, that has an effect on your energy bills. And oh, by the way, synthetic grass has to be watered. It needs to be watered in order to be kept clean. It gets very dusty. And so when we go down the path of removing grass and then choosing something that isn't green, growing, and abundant, we actually set ourselves on a path that ends up killing that soil sponge and creating a more desertified condition. We call this desertification, and it actually makes the soils hydrophobic. Hydrophobic is a big word, but it basically means that the soils now repel water. So even when the rains come, the soils will repel them, and it sloughs off of the soil. And that leads to a cycle of even deeper drought. Our water is dirtier. We get more dust storms. Just ask the people in Arizona. They deal with this all the time, or the people even in Iowa. They're dealing with dust storms all the time. I would really hate it if California, especially the Central Valley areas, and we're all affected by it. I would hate it if we were also dealing with dust storms. It's really a terrible thing. So, I think I've said enough on why we want to make sure we plant something when we remove the grass. So let's get into what we can do, the watershed approach, and how lawn actually fits into it. The watershed approach is essentially a way of thinking about landscapes where everything we do for designing and installing a new landscape is taking advantage of the natural water cycle. So what we are doing is we're evaluating our site, and we're seeing, where does water fall on the property? And usually that's the roof of our home. And then where does it run off? And as it runs off of our property, we're going to make interventions that are going to keep that water on our property. And we're going to hold it on the property rather than let it go and use it as a resource. So we have 4 principles that essentially help us to design a landscape that will hold on to the water and actually will be a landscape of abundance. And those 4 principles start with healthy living soil. That's why I just spent a whole section talking about how degraded soil gets when we just take out lawn and put down, hardscape. Healthy living soil is the most important thing to us in a landscape. And if we have it, we can have a thriving garden no matter what we plant. We want to select climate appropriate plants, and especially our local natives as much as possible because they're adapted. We want to capture rainwater, use it as a resource. The way that we capture rainwater is we put it into the ground. We don't need a cistern. We don't even really need a rain barrel, although they're fine. But what we're doing is we're making little depressions, as you see in the picture, no flat yards anymore. And we hold on to water there. And then if we have to use irrigation, we make sure it's highly efficient. And we don't water just because it's a Tuesday. We water because the plants actually need it. So we use weather-based irrigation control. And we're thinking about irrigation water really as a supplement to the water that we're saving when it rains. And so every single property can be turned into a mini watershed. And if we apply these 4 principles to our landscape, we would actually restore our watersheds. And what we're doing basically is we're mimicking a balanced water cycle. So when water comes from the sky, we're holding it in the plants and in the soil. And then when the sun comes back out, we are releasing that water slowly back into the atmosphere where it can form clouds and come back to the ground as rain. This balanced water cycle is intermediated. In other words, everything that happens here is happening because we have plants and healthy living soil. And when we have that, we end up with the benefits of our groundwater gets recharged, our rivers and streams get recharged, the plants are healthier, the air and atmosphere is cooler. And ultimately, if we all did this and restored our natural watershed, we'd be having much more balanced and gentle rain cycles. So turning dirt into the soil sponge is the most important thing. Look at that soil. That looks like cake, doesn't it? That is what we are trying to do. And it doesn't matter whether you have sand, silt, or clay, it can be done. We want to make sure that we are living in harmony, if you will, to where we live. And we are mimicking the things that are in our natural environment. Back to this a second. If you look at this grass system here, it doesn't look anything like a lawn, does it? I mean, it looks pretty different, but this is a grass dominated system. That's natural to California. We want to build more habitat, which means we have to be intentional about planting plants and giving opportunities for habitat to join us. We also are able to consult some really great resources. So there are these 2 books. Don't worry, you get things like this in the resources. And they have information about how to remove grass and how to create something really magical. If you look at that picture on the Reimagining California Lawn in the upper right-hand corner of the book, that's a pretty magical space. Wouldn't that be cool in your front yard? Now, maybe you've actually tried replacing grass before. So here's an example that we actually worked on, case A, we call it, and then the grass is back after a very short period of time. It's very, very difficult to actually remove the grass. It's something that you really have to work hard to do. And frankly, it's quite frustrating. This garden has native plants in it, but the grass came back with a fury. And here's another one. This is what it looked like before. And here's what it looked like afterwards because the mulch isn't maintained and they're not keeping after the grasses or weeds by removing them. And so as a result, this landscape is actually converting back into a landscape that, yes, has the native plants, has drip irrigation, but it also is the lawn is trying to recolonize it. So this is a problem that we face with many of our turf transformation programs. So the question is, would it be possible for us to make a transformation, in the landscape without actually taking the lawn out? Is there something that we could do that would meet all of our objectives with water conservation and all these other ecosystem objectives, with this good soil and biodiversity and capturing rain and so forth? Could we do it without removing lawn? Maybe. Well, this means that we're going to have to understand a little bit more about how lawns, in fact, every garden works. So the first thing is, as we mentioned, creating a soil sponge is the most important thing that we can do in our landscape, whether we're removing grass and replacing it or we're keeping our grass. And creating a soil sponge requires really two things. It requires that we add organic matter to the landscape. So that organic matter is in the form of compost and it's in the form of mulch. So we don't really have any part of the garden that is bare, open space, and just able to evaporate from the sun. We want it covered. And it also could be and should be covered by living mulch, which is essentially living plants. And it's the reason is that plants actually bring what another pathway to helping the soil, and this is called the liquid carbon pathway. Basically, plants are taking carbon out of the atmosphere and they are pumping it into the ground through their roots. And in doing so, they are fostering a microbial community that's re-engineering the soil and turning it into a sponge. So we add organic matter in the form of compost, we top it with mulch, and we plant a lot of living plants, as diverse as possible. So let's, if we're thinking now about, hey, we want to put plants in the ground. We've spent a lot of time here in this already in this conversation about that. What are the living plants that we want to put? Well, what's there now? What's there now are cool season grass or a warm season grass. And both of these grasses thrive, one with more water than the other. The cool season grass actually requires more water in California than the warm season grass does. And the cool season grass is actually green all year round if you irrigate it. It doesn't react to cold. It does need to be irrigated in the summertime, though, in order to stay green. If you don't irrigate it in the summertime, it will die back and turn brown. And actually, it will die if you don't irrigate it. Now, the warm season grass doesn't require as much water. It really only requires about 60% of the water that the cool season grass does. And it's a little bit more of a scrappy player. It's got these coarse roots that allow it to kind of repair itself. It loves summer heat. And it has an adaptation to cold. So when it gets cold, which is usually our winter time, it actually goes dormant and it goes gold. And if you think about it, the grasses that I showed a picture of grasslands earlier on. Those are mostly warm season grasslands. So the California grasslands are mostly this type of grass. And they actually go dormant in the wintertime. They turn gold. And then they start to green up in the spring. So these are the two different kinds of grasses that we might have on our site. And here are some pictures of them. The cool season grass, the one we're most accustomed to, is tall fescue. The warm season St. Augustine is one of them. And you can see it's got this like opportunity to repair these stolons and runners. Hybrid Bermuda is another warm season grass. So this might be what is growing in your landscape. And most lawns actually don't have very good soil underneath them. And that's because our management practices have really degraded them. We fertilize them, we add pesticides and herbicides sometimes. And so as a result, we only have these very, very short root systems, and which can barely even see a root system here, maybe a couple of inches. And we have this stuff called thatch on top, and that's what those fingers are indicating, is this thatch. We mow too frequently, so we cut it too short usually, and that actually really makes it very unresilient. It really needs a lot more water when it's cut short. And we also over irrigate it. So we apply a lot of water. We haven't trained grass to not need much water. Now, I talked about this already. Plants control their environment. They actually re-engineer their soil. They're trying to do this. Of course, if you're constantly cutting off the grass, it's having a very difficult time doing this re-engineering. And so that's really why the grass beneath our lawns isn't very good. But when we have grasses that are diverse and have, or we have a lawn that has a lot of different kinds of plants in it, we actually start to get things like pollinators and provide habitat for them. And we also get natural predators to pests. And this helps eliminate pesticides. So, who does the work in a lawn in order to, make it more resilient? Well, these guys do. And these are forbs. Forbs are essentially the things that we call weeds. Forbs are real plants. Oh, by the way, outside of a lawn condition, people don't call these things weeds, right? We actually grow some of these things, or relatives of these things. But the forbs have a really important role in our grass and in any landscape. Whenever there's bare soil, whenever there's soil that needs to be healed, needs to be converted into soil that is spongy, the first thing to arrive is a weed, is a forb. And the forbs tell us what the landscape is lacking. So a great example is if you have dandelions in your lawn, it means that you have compaction. There's no oxygen in the soil, and you also have a calcium deficit. And oh, by the way, calcium is one of the most important things for plants to actually get growing. So that's why you see dandelions in lawns, is because the soil beneath the grass has been so degraded. And the same thing, like when you see plantain, it means that there's a copper deficiency. So these plants are coming into our landscape, but specifically into our lawns, to try to heal the soil, to make the lawn greener, to make the lawn happier. So when you look at a situation like this and say, oh, gosh, this is just a bunch of weeds. Well, actually, I say, this is a bunch of forbs. All of these forbs are here trying desperately to fix this situation. They want to help the grass be green, and they also want to help make the soil healthy. So why don't we start shifting our perspective and figuring out what are some of these things that we could actually embrace in our lawns or enhance in our lawns to keep it happy and healthy, green, but also, make it better overall. And this includes things like plantain down at the bottom left. A plantain is a butterfly superfood. They need to have plantains, and several of our California butterflies love and live off of plantain. Yet we use pesticides, or herbicides rather, to eliminate the plantain in our grass. Purslane is another heavy duty, and it's actually a superfood for humans. Eating purslane is totally is delicious, lemony, spicy, and great in salads. Dandelion also, this is something we spend a lot of time trying to get rid of, but as I said before, these things are doing a job. A dandelion has a massive taproot. Look at that. And if you've been trying to remove it by taking it out by the root, you've been frustrated by that. But shift your perspective. That thing is trying to break up the soil compaction so that the grass roots can get longer. It's really an important first thing, for a landscape to have. Now, I want to show you this picture because I took this picture in Northern California, and I took it because I was very frustrated by turf removal projects that were taking a long time to come together and look beautiful. And my mind was open to alternatives. And I walked by this landscape and I found out that the water had been turned off here for 4 months in the summer. And yet there was something that was still green. These guys were still green. And I mean, not just a little green, they were bright green. And I thought to myself, well, what if I invited more plants like this into my lawn? Would I have a green lawn? And so we started thinking about this. We realized that if we could recruit different types of plants into a lawn and recruit them by using seed, which I'm going to show you. But if we recruited not just a dandelion, but if we tried to recruit lots of different structures, so some clover maybe, and maybe some additional grasses and other plants, if we brought them into the landscape, what would be the benefit of that? And it turns out that when you have plants that have a lot of different leaf structures, they also end up having different root structures. And as a result, they start engineering the soil in a bunch of different ways. The re-engineering happens a lot faster. They hold on to a lot more water in their root zone. They decompact faster, and things stay green longer. So we began to think, well, okay, what are some plants that would work really well if we kept grass in place and we added things in? And here are 4 excellent examples. Now, some of these, like the yarrow, are plants that we use in landscapes. Even if we remove lawn, we often plant, massive planting of yarrow and cranesbill and Bell's daisy. These are things that we add into landscapes anyway. What if we just started adding them into our lawn landscape? Many of these are nitrogen fixers or have other characteristics that help keep the lawn itself green and make it significantly more interesting. And more importantly, many of them are perennials, which means that they're not going to die out after 1 year. We began to think, well, what about adding some more diversity in grass species into the lawn? I mean, the lawn is essentially a monoculture. Maybe there are 1 or 2 different types of grass in there. But what would happen if we added even more grass into it? Could that make it look interesting? And also, would this help with making the overall effect more green, more interesting? And here you have 4 California native grasses that can be added into a landscape or added into a lawn that would make it more resilient and make it more interesting. So I know this is a tough idea, but are you starting to maybe see things differently? What about creating alternative lawns? So keep in mind that when we have complex ecosystems, it's far more resilient and, frankly, I think more beautiful than when we have a monoculture of turf that not only do we only have 1 or 2 grass species, but we also know that we're having to apply fertilizer, water, herbicides, and pesticides to keep it looking like that. What if we had a ecosystem in our front yard that was based on the lawn, but had a lot of complexity, like what you see here? Like, there are probably 5 or 6 different species going on here. And yes, there's grass, you can see it there, but it's not the dominant species in this landscape. We would probably end up with lawns that had required less water, no fertilizers, no poisons, were green all year round, infiltrated water faster, meaning they actually absorbed water. They slowed down erosion and flooding. And then, in kind of a more esoteric plane, they build soil carbon. And oh, by the way, we're not making the landscape and our environment hotter. We're cooling it down by planting so many green plants. You could just encourage clover where you have it in your lawn, or you could overseed with clover. And this is the simplest thing that you can do with the lawn to make it better. Adding something that fixes nitrogen is really important because the grass itself can't fix nitrogen. So it needs to have a helper to do that. And that's why we apply fertilizer, is because we're trying to keep it green without having a helper. But if we overseeded with clover, the grass would stay green because the clover helps out the grass. And there's even something called micro clover, which you can see here in this picture. And that fills in gaps in between the grasses and has this, cute little pink flower and so forth. And that is, easy to add. The seed is easily available. And this would just be a very, easy way if you did end up wanting to keep your lawn, but use less water and have all these benefits. Just overseeding with clover gets you a long way to a benefit. And then leaving things like these asteraceae, or maybe even adding some more into it so that they can start doing that work of breaking up compaction. And don't forget, they're evergreen, so they're green all year round too, even when the water gets turned down. So maybe we could start rethinking what makes our lawns beautiful, and maybe think of a new kind of lawn. This lawn uses addition. In other words, we are keeping grass in place, but we're adding more plants into it. We're adding California natives into it. We're adding other plants that can be helpful to the lawn. We're not thinking about subtraction. We're not talking about removing the grass. We're not talking about, uh, you know, putting down herbicides or pesticides. We're saying to ourselves, hey, I want a landscape where I just keep adding, and making it more and more complex and interesting. And in that way, I get my California native landscape, but with a lot less work and a lot less money. And so one thing that we could do is add yarrow into the lawn. I showed a picture of yarrow earlier, but here you can see it actually in the lawn doing its thing. A yarrow lawn is highly coveted, actually, in many places. It can be done from seed, and it can be done by plugging the yarrow planting the yarrow into the grass area. Eventually, this yarrow, it doesn't outcompete lawn, but it co-competes with lawn, and it makes it look like this. Adding gazania is another thing that we could do to lawn. You can buy gazania in flats. It's a relatively inexpensive ground cover. And instead of removing the lawn again, as you see here, the gazania was planted into it. And this can outcompete lawn over some period of time. So yeah, I mean, pretty interesting, right? The gazania is a South African ground cover, and it's pretty great, pretty aggressive. We can add walkable ground covers, like on the lower right, you see carapia, which is, people remove their lawn and put carapia in. And I'm going to show you a picture in just a second where the carapia outcompetes the lawn. And so you don't need to remove the lawn to put carapia in. On the left, we have Fragaria, which is a strawberry. This is an aggressive ground cover and it's actually a native strawberry. It is aggressive ground cover, and it actually does really well in shady areas. And all of these are very low water requiring. So we're talking here about shifting, a landscape that requires a lot of water to something that doesn't require much water at all. Here's that picture of carapia and grass. Carapia can be mowed, especially if you don't want it to have the flowers on it. Now, the flowers, it flowers, abundantly, and some people are kind of freaked out by how much flowering there is, because bees can come to that and be, just absolutely joyous being in a carapia lawn. So many people do mow it, once a month or so, in order to keep it just green. And here, look at what's going on here. This is a warm season grass lawn that carapia was planted in it, and the carapia is winning in this particular case. And carapia is a low water requiring plant, so this lawn requires very little water in comparison to what it did before the carapia was added. When we get really complex, we can get lawns and green spaces that could look as complex as this, or we could mow it and have it look like something else. And so I'm going to show you now how we get there. The way that we get there is by, as I just said, either plugging some plants into the landscape, into the lawn, or adding seed. So the first thing that we want to remind you to do is, no matter what, whether you keep a lawn, remove the lawn, or do what we're about to talk about, which is overseeding a lawn, we want to make sure that you invest in a soil probe to see what's really going on down there in the root zone of the plants. This is the way that you manage your landscape the best. And when you are selecting seeds, we want to make sure that you don't just, you're not done. When you just, like, if you overseed with clover, for example, you're not done for the long term. That's a great short-term solution, and it helps you to kind of get the new aesthetic and understand, oh, I can have flowers in this lawn. But to really have something that is resilient and that's going to achieve all this lower water and so forth, you really want to have as many species as possible. So we really recommend that you, especially if you're buying seed to overseed your lawn, you look for at least 5 species. So 5 different plants are in that seed combination. If you can get 10 different plants, even better. And of course, 30 is amazing, but 5 is kind of our minimum. And in doing that, we want to make sure that we are getting, some grasses. We want to get some flowering perennials, and we want to get some legumes. I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a second. This diversity of different kinds of plants is really important in any seed mix that we're applying. Really, whether we're overseeding the lawn or putting seed elsewhere in our garden, diversity is key. So the 2 things we want to think about are, we want to make sure that we have a seed mix that has some other grass seed in it. So it has California native grasses or some other mix of grasses in it. And it also has lots of flowering perennial plants in it. And we want to make sure that it has those legumes. We are going to get a sufficient quantity of seed so that we can put down 3 to 4 pounds of seed for every 1,000 square foot. So when you're purchasing your seed, you want to make sure that you're buying enough of it. It usually comes in 1 pound to 5 pound bags. And you want to make sure that you have 3 to 4 pounds of a diverse mix going onto each 1,000 square feet. Now, this is very hard to read, and I'm just putting it up there because I want to show you, we've done a lot of experimenting with this, and you can add a lot of different kinds of plants, and a lot of these plants come from mixes that are made by seed companies that are actually creating mixes to go over lawn. One of them is called a Western Ziri mix, which is dry. Ziri means dry. And I'm going to direct you to some of these sources. But when you go online and you start to look for seed for changing my lawn or something like that, lots of options are going to come up, and finding a mix is probably the best way to go. And the reason is that when you have a mix, you get really diverse leaf structures. And remember, we talked about that. That's an important part of transformation, is diverse structures. So mixes give you that. And, you can do it. You can also, I know I have clients who pick their seed by color. Like, oh, I really want, I want more of the blues and stuff, and I want more of the yellows. And I always say, yeah, and both. So blue and yellow. Try not, again, to, make it a monoculture or even a mono aesthetic. You want to have a variety of colors. Lots of diverse structures. I mean, in some of our seed mixes, we even have a bean, so that's pretty diverse. And multiple cultivars. So things that are like not just one kind of clover. Like this is a micro clover down here on the left, and up on the right is a red clover. Both of them, not just one, should be selected. So once you get your seed mix together, again, 3 to 4 pounds of seed, you're going to want to mix it with really good compost. And for every 1,000 square feet, you not only need 3 to 4 pounds of seed, but you also need what's called 1 yard of compost. So that is 27 cubic feet of compost. And what you are going to do in order to put the seed down on your landscape is you're going to mix it with the compost. And this is because seeds only germinate when they have soil contact. And so the compost is acting as a soil, as the soil that the germination can happen in. And also, this allows the mix to go down kind of evenly onto the ground, and it covers it, keeps it from birds eating everything. And it also provides a little bit of organic matter to kind of help the landscape do better. You would be putting down compost anyway. Remember, building a soil sponge needs compost. So mixing the seed into the compost is a really good way to go. Okay, how do we actually do this thing now? Well, don't worry that your grass isn't green. It's okay. This is an okay landscape to transform this way. No problem. Your renovation is going to start with just the grass as it is, and you're going to mow it. And when you mow it really super short. Now, I know that I said earlier, mowing short is what has gotten us into a situation where we don't have very deep roots and so forth. That's true. But because we are going to now add compost and add seeds and really transform the grass, we need to mow it very, very short so that we are giving these other seeds an opportunity to germinate and take hold. If we didn't knock back the grass aggressively, then the germination wouldn't happen. It would be too shaded, and there'd be too much competition from the grass. So what we're doing is we're mowing the grass super, super, super tight to the ground, almost to bare soil, really. And also, we're going to do something called dethatching. And dethatching is basically removing this dead material. So you see there that first inch? That isn't roots. That's dead material that will not decompose. And it is actually inhibiting this grass from getting water when we irrigate, or even when it rains. It makes oxygen exchange very difficult, and your grass really struggles the more thatch it has. So we want to identify the thatch, and then we want to remove it. And the way we remove it is with a thatch rake. If you have a professional doing this, they can come with a dethatcher, a walk behind. So a dethatching rake is something you can get at a big box store, and you can see here what's happening, right? All that dead stuff is being raked out. We actually do that before we mow. But it could go either way. You could mow first and then dethatch. It might actually be a little bit easier, or you could dethatch first and then mow. And professionals will usually rent or bring a dethatcher, but you could also rent one of these at a big box store. So you rake away all that debris that you have dislocated from the soil, and you're going to save that debris because one, you may cover the newly seeded area with it after you've laid the seed out. Or if you have basins where you're going to be capturing rainwater, you can fill them up with the thatch, and the thatch will decompose there. After you've dethatched and you've mowed, you're going to do this thing called core aeration. And here's what it looks like. This is basically a machine that's taking little holes, little cores out of the soil, and it makes these little holes in the soil. And basically what you're doing is you're mimicking animals when you do this. You're pretending that you're a herd of buffalo going across the grass and making little depressions in the grass, and you're creating a way for oxygen to get into the soil. here's another picture of it. You can see you leave the cores on the ground, that's fine. But these holes are going to become ways that the seed has contact with the soil. It's a way that oxygen gets into it. It's a way that water is going to get into it when we start to water. So dethatching, mowing, and core aeration. These are the three things. So basically it's like a herd of animals has come through. It's made little holes and it's eaten down all the grass. You can have that in your head as this is going on. And we also want to make sure that we don't have any flat yards. So just like if we were moving the grass, we would want to be putting in swales and berms. We're going to do the same thing even if we keep the grass in place. And the way that we do that is with what we call cut and flip. Cut and flip is basically removing the grass in some areas and just flipping it over upside down to create a berm. So instead of digging down and, making our depressions and basins and so forth, we're just removing the grass in the area where we want to hold on to the rainwater, and then we are flipping the grass over to create the berm, and then we're going to put the seed down on top of it all and create a lawn that has a contour to it. So it has high spots and low spots. So this is what it looks like when you're peeling up the grass and you're just flipping it over to make the berm. So after you've done that, then you add your seed mixed with the compost into a spreader. This is also something that you can rent. Not too expensive to purchase either, but professionals have this because they overseed almost every year anyway for many lawns. So this is something that is not unfamiliar to them. And you put down that compost with the seed in it in the spreader, and you start to roll it out. And that's what it looks like. You're rolling it out so that everything is covered with it. It's going to be about 1/4 of an inch deep. And you go back over it and kind of look, do you have good coverage? Is the compost pretty much everywhere? Can you see some seeds sticking out? Okay, that's great. That's exactly what it needs to look like. And after it's like this, you can come back and put that thatch down on top of all of this, just to protect it a little bit further. And then you start to irrigate. And in the beginning, because it is germination irrigation, you're going to be irrigating every day. And stuff's going to start to grow. And it's going to keep growing until it's 3 to 4 inches tall. One way that you can deal with this is you could actually stop irrigating with your built-in, with your automatic sprinklers and start using an oscillating sprinkler. This is actually a more efficient way to irrigate because you have to turn it on and turn it off and be aware of it. But once the seeds have grown up to 4 inches, we're going to continue to water until they get to 8 inches. And but we're not doing it every day. Now we're down to like 3 times a week or 4 times a week, and we're cutting back the watering. So the taller the plants are growing, the less water they're going to start receiving. At 8 inches a week, we are going to be only watering once a week. And again, an oscillating sprinkler is just a great way to go. Now, once it gets to 8 inches, we have to make a decision. Are we going to mow it and try to keep it more like a lawn, a typical lawn, or are we going to let it continue to grow and flower? And really, this is up to you. It's your aesthetic. And many people that we work with start out saying, no, I'm going to mow it. I want it to be short, and if you do mow it, you're keeping it between 4 and 7 inches. It's never getting shorter than 4 inches. But if you let it grow, it could grow, up to 3 feet. You could let it flower completely and then weed whack it down once a year. In general, when your mowing height increases, your water use decreases. So when you keep your grass at 4 to 7 inches, it actually uses a lot less water. So a couple of tips, even if you don't do this to your landscape and you're just going to keep your lawn, make sure that you're mowing when it's dry, you're mowing in a cooler part of the day. You're not necessarily mowing on a regular schedule. You mow only once a month, really, for 4 to 7 inches. And if you can, use your own mower or have your landscaper have a dedicated mower if your landscape's large enough. And leave the clippings when you do mow. So anything that gets cut off stays on the landscapes to decompose and provide organic matter. Now, where do you get the seeds? Well, we recommend that you use a search engine, and you put in clover seed for lawn, meadow seed mixes for lawn, or even grass seed mixes for lawn, low water grass seed mixes for lawn. And what's going to come up, and these are actually pictures from websites of different mixes, all these different mixes are going to come up. Remember, you want more diversity if you possibly can. So I'm pointing to the one on the left because there's a lot of different stuff going on there. So isn't that a crazy idea? But you could have flowers in your lawn without taking it out. Now, if you do decide that you want to remove your grass and do the more traditional turf removal program, the good news is California American Water has rebates for you. Right now, if you're in Los Angeles and Ventura, it's $3 a square foot to remove the grass and replace it with other plant material. If you're in San Diego, you get $1.50 up to 750 square feet. And if it's a commercial site, it's up to 2,500 square feet. If you are in Sacramento, Meadowbrook, and Hillview, it's $2 a square foot to remove. And don't worry, you're getting links to all this, but we are reviewing it so that you know. If you're in Sonoma County, it's $1 a square foot. And there are also wonderful rebates on smart irrigation controllers that use the weather and other outdoor devices like smart irrigation conversions, all kinds of great stuff. You can find it in Southern California, Los Angeles, at SoCalWatersmart.com. So I see that the poll has gone up, and I want to encourage you to go ahead and do that evaluation. I just want to pitch that on October 16th, we are going to be doing another class on drip irrigation. We're going to be talking about how to install drip irrigation and why to install it, but how to install it even more importantly. So join us for that class live. And then also I mentioned that all of the classes are available online, and you're going to get a link to this site, the watershed-wise training site, to the California American Water portal, and you will be able to watch any of these classes and this one again if I went too fast. Okay, so thank you so much, California American Water. I know we're a little over time, but I figure we could probably answer one or two questions.
Yeah. There was, so I think maybe one of the things, a couple of people were asking the same question, and that is that they don't actually have grass. So it was like, well, can I do this like in sort of a dead zone? Can I do this in a parkway where nothing's
Yeah.
growing? So if you want to, how they might take what you're talking about and
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is really great for that. So here's something I didn't say at the very beginning is this is a strategy, very low cost strategy that you can do if you want to wait to change out your landscape. So changing a landscape is always easier to do. Like when you want to plant woody plants and trees and stuff like that, it's easier to do when the soil's healthy. Now, how do you get to healthy soil? Well, you do this kind of thing. So instead of, removing the grass and then immediately putting in woody plants, you could take a year or two and allow the grass itself to get better, the soil under the grass to get better by doing this. And in the meantime, you have low water use plants and you have all these other benefits. So that is something that, it could be a transition strategy on your way to doing something, more significant with your landscape. And so it applies also if you're in a situation where maybe you don't have grass. The one thing is that it works better, I will say, all of this works better when the grass is in place because it's already a living root in the soil, right? If you don't have living roots in the soil, everything has to kind of get started. So if you have bare soil, one of the things I recommend is if you purchase a mix, like a meadow mix, let's say, or a native seed mix to do something like this, you also purchase a grass seed mix. So at the same time, get some California grass seeds, and there are mixes that have that. And the ratio that you're going to want to use is 50% of your mix you want to have be grass. And this is really, really important if you don't have any existing grass. So if it's bare, you want to make sure that half of the mix is from these grasses. And so that means if you're going to be doing, let's say, 4 pounds of seed on 1,000 square foot landscape, 2 pounds are going to be the grass seed mix. And the other 2 pounds can be your native plant mix, and maybe maybe it's 1.5 pounds of native plant mix and then 1/2 pound of clover. And you mix all that together and you will get germination on bare soil.
Great.
Yeah.
And then one more question, because a couple of people have asked, is there an optimal time or a better time to be doing this?
Well, it's a little bit, it's interesting. First of all, this is an irrigated landscape. All right. So you can irrigate it with spray and obviously the oscillating sprinklers. So it is irrigated. So it doesn't really matter if you do it in the spring, fall, summer, or winter. Unlike with our native plants that definitely have a native woody plants that definitely have a cycle that you want to take advantage of capturing the rain for. They're already perennial woody plants. They are going to enjoy that rain in the cool time and really start to put down root structure at that time. With seeds, it's a little bit different. Some of the seeds in the mix are going to be really happy to be planted in the fall and enjoy the rain. And you won't have to irrigate as much to get germination. But what you're going to see is that the number of seeds that germinate or the different types of plants that germinate is going to be limited if you plant in the fall. It doesn't mean it's not going to work. It just means you need to be a little patient. You may only have 3 or 4 different things that come up in the fall. And then in the spring, when there's a little bit more heat, we're going to start to see, another cycle of plants coming up and so forth. So that's the thing about planting with seeds, is that different seeds have different timing throughout the year that that's optimal for them. And because they are getting irrigation or are getting water, they're not going to, you can't force them to grow in the wintertime when it's too cold or too wet or whatever. It's just not their time. They are going to wait until until April, May, June, and then they're going to pop. And so the answer to this question is, you can pretty much do it anytime. If you do want to limit your irrigation, which we do want to do, and you know that you're only getting certain seeds germinating, the fall is the best time to do it. So right now, right, we have a little bit of heat still. Yeah. It's fall. We're going into the winter. And I would say all the way through until about June. And when you get to June and you're doing, we just did a project where we had to seed in June and July. It's not good. Yeah, it's not as good because you're having to apply all that irrigation. And also those seeds sometimes grow super, super, super fast in the summertime. So like staying on top of it and mowing it and like managing it, it can get a little frenetic. So I would say September, October, November, great time. If you don't make it then, all the way out to June, don't do it if you can avoid it in the summertime, and then pick it up again in the fall.
Great. Well, that was a beautiful way to end our class. Wendy, Victoria, anything you'd like to say as we wrap it up for the evening?
I just want to let everybody know that I did post our website in the chat. It does have more information specifically about all the rebates and that are going on depending on your district. And just so you have it readily available.
All right. Thank you. Victoria? Oh, you're muted.
Second time today. Thank you all so much for being here. This was a wonderful class. I hope you guys are inspired to make some changes to your landscape. But if you need us, check out our website and give us a call. Thanks so much.
I think one thing I do want to say before we go is this class fits into all the other classes. We talk in class after class after class about removing the lawn and putting in new stuff. And this is just another tool for us to make change.
Mhm.